Well, hello, everybody. I hope you are all having a wonderful Thanksgiving week. And we are going to dive into installing macOS Sonoma on a Haswell system. This is going to be a complete guide from start to finish, so you can get an idea of how to build an EFI folder that you need to install macOS on a PC. Now, if you guys remember, if you've ever watched a lot of my videos, I did a video when I first started my channel on this little computer right here. And this is a Lenovo ThinkCentre. It's called a M93 Tiny, and it is tiny. And we are going to build an EFI to install macOS Sonoma on this system. So what we need to do is we first need a USB stick, and nowadays with 32 gigabytes of space to get Sonoma on our USB stick to install macOS, okay? So I've got a 32 gig stick right here. I'm going to put it in the back of this Lenovo. And we are, yes, building this EFI on this Lenovo. So I'll show you right here what we're working with. Right here it is. It's an i5, and it has only 8 gigabytes of RAM. I would suggest 16, but hey, it runs really good on 8. And it has the Intel HD 44/4600 graphics chip, which is no longer supported in Sonoma, but the OpenCore people right here have made it easy for us to make the graphics work in high definition and accelerated graphics. So we're going to use OpenCore Legacy Patcher to install basically a trick to macOS so we get accelerated graphics. Okay, so let's get started with this. I'm going to go ahead and minimize. So what we want to do is go to Disk Utility right here. Open this up. Make sure that you press this down arrow and show all devices. And the reason I tell you that is I will show you. If you don't do that, if it by default it shows it like this. I see the word USB, which is this, but I need the name of the disk. I need the root of the USB. So I show all devices, and there it is, my USB SanDisk. All right, so make sure you do this. And then I'm going to click Erase. I just name it USB, and we'll change this to macOS Extended Journal and GUID Partition Map and click Erase. All right. So now we need to download macOS to build the USB stick. So I'm going to go over here to the web, and I'm going to go to OpenCore. And just click on Get Started. We're going to come up here to creating the USB. Okay, so here we are, and we're doing it right now on a Mac. We've already done the Windows version in a previous video. So we'll click here, and we'll just go down here till we see this command line. We'll just copy this. Go up here to Spotlight, type in terminal. And click there. We'll paste that line into here and hit enter. And it's going to find all of the Mac OSs that we could download. And I want the latest version of Sonoma, which is right here. Now it says, please enter version number you wish to download. So we're going to put 14.1.1 because that's the version number, and that's the latest version. Okay, we hit enter, And eventually this will download, and it will take quite a bit of time to do, but we'll come back when it's done. Okay, guys, so now we'll go to the applications folder, and we'll see that our install macOS Sonoma ended up in our applications folder, which is where we need it. All right, now we got to build the USB. So let's go over here and type in make a USB bootable right here Mac. And we click this right here. This is Apple support. And we'll go down here till we see Sonoma, because we need a line, command line again. We're going to copy this command line. Go up to terminal, put that line in. Now right here where it says my volume, we need to change that to whatever you named the stick. I named it USB. So I'm going to put in USB. Hit enter, put in my password, and then say yes, because it's going to tell you it's going to erase the whole drive. Okay? All right, so it will go through, and this will take a little bit of time, so go relax. When we come back, we'll have a USB stick with macOS Sonoma on it, ready to continue. Okay? All right, we'll be right back. Okay, guys, so right here we have macOS Sonoma, and there is our program ready to install. So now we have to build an EFI folder that goes into a hidden partition of this USB stick to install macOS. It's a bootloader. It tells, the EFI says, here is the equipment, here is the hardware that I am installing this macOS on. So it tricks macOS into believing that basically it's a real Mac. Okay? So let's go over and grab our wonderful OC auxiliary tools. This is probably the best thing that ever happened to OpenCore. I'm going to click here on the releases. I'm going to download the latest one. All right, so there it is. And I'm going to just double click on it and drag this over here on the desktop. Now, the first thing we want to do when we open up auxiliary tools, right click on it and open, and then click open. All right, so here it is. Now we want to make sure that we are on the latest version of OpenCore. So I'm going to click here, and I'm going to click on this and click latest version and get latest version. Okay. All right, so the latest version is 0.9.6. Okay, so we are ready to continue. Now I'm going to close this so it's not so ugly. Okay, the first thing we need to do, we are building on this Haswell Lenovo, so we need to start a Haswell EFI build. All right, so the first thing you do with auxiliary tools, which makes this so easy, is go over here and click the configuration templates, and then go over here. It'll take you right to their website. Click on plist, and I want 4th gen right here. 4th gen Haswell. Just click on that and download. Now what this is downloading is a config.plist, which is extremely necessary to make our EFI folder. So we'll go over here, and I'm going to rename this to config .plist. All right. Then right click and open it with auxiliary tools. All right. Now, if it doesn't pop up here or populate, just go over here and open, and then go to your downloads and click on it again and open. All right, there we go. Now, what I want to do is I want to actually build the EFI folder right here on my desktop. So I'm going to go up here to Edit and Generate EFI on Desktop. Okay, there it is. Now, inside of here, we have necessary files for the bootloader. And that is these SSDTs under ACPI, the drivers that we need, and the sum of the kexts that we need. Kext, if you think about it in the terms of Microsoft or Windows computer, are kind of like drivers, okay? And if you don't have a driver for a particular part of your Intel or your Windows PC, then those things are not going to work. So like right here, we don't have a kext for our LAN controller or Wi-Fi or Bluetooth. So we need a couple things. All right, so everything else here is fine the way it sits. So we'll click out of here, and this is a graphical interface of what's going on. Now I'll go through each one of these items for you, okay? This again is our ACPI, and these are our SSDTs. We have booter. There's not really much to talk about here except quirks. These quirks are already set for you and should work fine, but if you do run into an error trying to boot, you may have to change one of these settings. Okay, this is display properties, and these are different options for our particular Haswell. These are the command lines, so to speak, of what we need to get our graphics working. Remember, this little Haswell I have here does not have a dedicated graphics card. It has Intel graphics built on the CPU. So we have to have the correct lines up here for our display ports. And it just so happens this one right here is set up to what we need. And here is our graphics that I talked about right here. This is what we need to get it to work properly. So these little hashtags means these are turned off, okay? This one is on. It has no hashtag. So I hope that explains what's going on here. Kernel, again, these are our drivers, so to speak, or our kexts. I'm going to eliminate these two because they are not necessary. This right here, SMC processor, this is a kext that if you wanted to run a separate little program that tells you the heat of the processor, then you would need this kext. I'm not worried about it on this little system, and I'm just going to eliminate both of these. All right, that'll just keep you from being confused. Now, there are kexts here, like I said before, that are missing, but we'll get into that in a little bit. And there's also quirks that are already set for you that you may have to change again on your system if things don't work. While we're right here, I want to talk about this XHCI port limit. Now that is enabled. If it has a check mark, it means it's turned on. So when we're building a Sonoma or Ventura, when we're installing macOS, we need to make sure that we turn on the USB ports on the machine or the motherboard that we are trying to install macOS on, so we can then do what's called port mapping, USB port mapping. On Mac computers, you're only allowed to have up to 15 USB ports enabled. And you say, well, gosh, that's plenty. But you cut it in half real quick when you have USB 2 and USB 3. So now we're down to like 7 of each. All right. And we can decide which of those USB ports we want to have working and which ones that are not necessary to our application. Okay. You may want, let's say your motherboard enables 20 USB ports. And you say, well, I got to get it down to 15 between USB 2 and 3 and C, USB-C. So I've got to eliminate some. Well, I might have an application or a work environment where I need a lot of USB 2s. So I may want to leave on more 2s than 3s because I'm not using that many USB 3s. I hope that isn't too confusing, but we'll get into USB port mapping later in this whole series of how to install macOS on a PC. So let's not worry too much about this right now, but these are also settings that sometimes we have to change to get our computer to boot properly and work properly. Miscellaneous. This is an area that doesn't really need to be addressed much when using a template from OpenCore auxiliary tools because it's already set for us. A couple things I will note though, right here, it's the boot picker. This is when you first boot up a Hackintosh computer, there will be a little menu that pops up and it's graphical, and it will, if you have this set to external, if you have it set to built in right here, then it will be text only. But we like to use the graphical, so we use external. And that's where you pick to choose. Let's say you're going to have dual boot. You may have Windows hard drive installed on your Hackintosh, and you may have a Mac. So you choose which one you want to install into. This right here, timeout, is kind of important to us. This is where we set the amount of seconds before it just defaults and just starts installing because you haven't picked anything. Okay? So a couple of things that we talk about here. Now, debug is an area that we may have to change something if we run into trouble, but we're okay right now with this system. And security is already set for us, and vault and scan policy is already set for us. If you went by the OpenCore guide, then you would get into needing to set all of these things up, but these are already set because we're using OpenCore auxiliary tools and their templates. All right, NVRAM. Now this is an area that we can sometimes install command lines to get other things to work, okay? For us, it's not necessary, but we're going to go down here to this one because we do need to put in some boot arguments, okay? And right here it says boot args. Now, I'm going to put in a few here. Now, this -V is text that you will see on the screen when we are installing macOS. The reason we want to see that text as opposed to just an Apple logo is because we want to see what's going on. And if the computer stops and in the middle of booting, we want to see where it stopped. So we need that text on for now while we're installing. When we are done installing and everything's working great, we can turn off this -V, which stands for verbose mode, and we'll have just the Apple logo, just like a real Mac. Now, a couple other things we need to put in are boot arguments, and this is just by default. We'd want to put in keep sims equals 1 and then a space. There's a space between each boot argument. And debug equals 0x100 space, and then ALCID equals 1. The ALCID is for your audio. By default, many audio chips will work with the number 1, but there are some instances where you need to change that number, and we'll get into that later. But let's put in 1 for default. All right. And that's all we need for this particular system. So we hit enter and we're done with that. And I'm going to click save. Then we come down here to platform info. All right. Now, this is where we use a system product name that is still supported by macOS Sonoma. I'm going to go over here to OpenCore. And I'm going to go down here to where it says Ventura. All right. These things right here, these names are also called SM BIOS. Okay. So we click here to supported SM BIOS. All right. SM BIOS dropped in Ventura, and above, of course, are all of these. The only things that are supported are right here. Okay. So these are supported SM BIOS, and we click here and we see all the lists. So these are the supported ones. Now you say, well, which one can I use for this one? Well, there are a couple of different ones you could use, but I'm going to go with iMac Pro 1,1. So I'm going to go up here and I'm going to go up to iMac Pro 1,1. And this works very well for this particular system. Now, something else that we need is we need system serial numbers, motherboard numbers, and system UUID numbers. Okay, these are like serial numbers on a real Mac. And if we don't have serial numbers, we're not going to be able to use any of Apple's resources, or you're not going to be able to log into iCloud. You're not going to be able to do a lot of things. So we want to generate serial numbers. Okay, so we just click this and it generated numbers for us. We click save. UEFI. Now in here, there are drivers that we talked about in the beginning of the video that are needed to boot the system. And so this is where those drivers are located. There are other things here that we can look at, but everything has already been set up for us. And really, in most applications, there's not much you need to change in the UEFI screen. So we're good to go. All right. Now, in order for our computer to boot really, really good and properly and not have a lot of conflicts, then we want to build our own SSDTs. Okay. These are what I call generic SSDTs. They will work, but they're not going to work necessarily the best. So in doing this complete tutorial on installing Sonoma on a Windows machine, I want to show you the correct way to do it. It's just going to make your system run better. So what we need to do that is we need to boot the computer we're going to load Sonoma onto. We need to boot it into Windows. All right. So I'm going to pull this hard drive out of this Lenovo. I'm going to stick a Windows drive in it and boot it up in Windows, and we'll be right back. Okay, guys, we're back up in Windows on this little Haswell system. Go over to the OpenCore website, and we're going to continue looking at installing macOS. Okay? So when we come down here to Haswell, click here, and we come to adding our ACPI, our SSDTs, we can see that the ones that we installed from our OpenCore auxiliary tools, it put in these two. So we should be fine, right? Yeah, we should be fine. But there's a better way to do it. And that is using the easy way SSDTs, okay? And right here, this Corp Nuit, he built this little program called SSDT time, okay? And if we download it right here, open it up, and there it is. So I'm going to get rid of mine over here, delete it, and I'm going to open this one up and drag it over here on the desktop. Okay. All right, so let's get into this real quick. It's not hard to do at all. So I'm going to come in here, and right here is SSDT time. This is what we need to launch. So right click on it and just open it up. All right, I'm going to stretch this out, make it a little bigger for you. Okay, so on this, the first thing we need to do is number 8. It's called dump DSDT. So we'll click 8, hit enter, and it did it. And we hit enter again and go back. So on Haswell, we're going to need this fake EC. We're going to need this fix HPET. And if you remember, we also needed the plugin type. All right. So, and that is what OpenCore told us. So let me go back and refresh your memory. Okay, Haswell. And what we need, ACPI, is plug, which is this one, number 4, and EC, which is number 2. Now, since we're here, we're going to go ahead and grab this HPET, and it will help as well. Now, if we click over here, let's say you're doing a Coffee Lake system, which is 10th gen, then you need a few more, okay? So we need plug, we need EC USB, which is here also, USB, and we need AWAC, which is also here, and we need PMC, which is also here. So each one of these will build the SSDTs that we need, all right? So enough of that. Let's go ahead and press number 1, and by default, we just press C here, and then we're done with that. Then we're going to do number 2, which we need, and we just hit enter. We're done with that. We don't need 3, that's for laptops. We need a number 4, plug, so we're done with that one. And that's all we need for our particular system. If we needed, like on the 10th gen, we would continue on. Now, where are these things? They're in a folder called results. Okay, so here we are. And I'm just going to grab a USB stick and put it in my Windows computer here. And this USB stick is formatted for exFAT, which means you can see it in Windows and you can see it in macOS. All right, so I'll put it in here, and I will make a folder for this little guy so I can put these SSDTs in there. So I'm going to just put M93P. Okay, and we'll go back up. Now we'll just click over here, results, and I'll go down here. Well, here's my M93 right here. All right, so I'm just going to grab all of this, just dump it in here, have it on my USB stick. Okay, so we are done with that. Now we're going to boot back into macOS, and finish making this USB stick. Okay, we're booting back in. Just wanted to show you what the text looks like when we're installing. Now we can eliminate this on boot up, this text, so we just have the Apple logo, like I said before. Okay, now in real world situation, you would be building your EFI on somebody's Mac or another Mac that you have. So you would be installing macOS on a Windows computer that you have. So what we just did going into Windows, you would do on the computer you want to install the macOS, okay? It would not do you any good if you did it on some other Windows machine. You've got to do that process, building the SSDTs on the PC that you're going to install macOS, all right? Okay, so I'm going to put my USB sticks back in here. All right, there we go. Okay, so this is the SSDTs that we just made. And we'll go down here to the M93 right here. So these are the files that we were talking about, and we need to put them in our ACPI folder. So we can get rid of these. And now we're going to grab the only ones we want are the AML. We don't want this DSL because we need this SSDT EC, right? So we need the AML, not this one. And we also need the AML for plug. So that's that one. And then also the HPET, this one, not this one. All right, we'll put it in here. Now let's go back to our config.p list right here. We'll right click and open with auxiliary tools. And close this out. We want to get rid of these two. All right, these are the old ones. And then we'll click the plus button and we'll go to our OC ACPI, and there's the three we just put in. So we'll just highlight them and open, and it injects them into our EFI folder that we need, okay? So we'll click save, and we are starting to look pretty good here. Now, let's go over to the web because we need a couple of kexts for Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, and the LAN controller on this Haswell Lenovo, okay? So let's just look it up. Lenovo Tiny 93P. And let's go ahead and just click on for specs because we want the specs. So we'll click here on it. What we need to know is what LAN controller is in this thing, okay? And which Wi-Fi and Bluetooth is it using? All right, so we come right here, for instance, and the Wi-Fi is an Intel, usually an Intel Centrino Wireless 2230. So that tells us that we are supported with the kexts we're going to use. All right. And then we need the LAN controller. And for some reason, they put it down here under Bluetooth, Ethernet, and modem. All right. So it is an I217. All right. So let's go back over to OpenCore. And we're going to go to gathering files. Okay. Right here. Now, this is where we get our kexts. The Ethernet controller, right here. There's the I217, and it is supported by the Intel Mousy kext. So we'll click this. We'll click the release, and it's downloaded for us, okay? We'll go back, and we want to go to Wi-Fi Bluetooth. All right, so for our card, we're going to download this kext. Now, this particular kext, all they have right now is an alpha version. It's a pre-release version, but it is working. And then they have the stable 2.2 version here, but if you'll notice, there's nothing for Sonoma. So we have to go up here, click on it, assets, and here is our Sonoma kext that we'll use until they get a finished version done. But it does function and does work. All right, we'll go back over to gathering files, and we also need Intel Bluetooth firmware. This is for our Bluetooth. We'll just download this one. And then for Monterey or newer, please read instructions. So we come over here, and it tells us that we need to install the Intel BT patcher. We need the Bluetooth firmware, but we do not want to include Bluetooth injector, which was for previous versions to Monterey. But we do need this blue tool fix-up. So we'll click here. We'll go to the latest version, and we'll grab the release version. Okay. So let's go over here to our downloads and let's start grabbing them. So we need this one. And all we need is this top kext, the Bluetooth fix-up kext. We don't need any other kext. So I'm going to just open this up, go to OC, and I'm going to drag and drop these into my kext folder. All right, so we got that one. We also need a couple out of this one, Intel Bluetooth. So we need firmware and patcher, not the injector. Okay, grab those, put them in here. And then we also need this kext for our Wi-Fi to work. So we'll put it in here. Okay, so let's go back over to our OC auxiliary tools and go to kernel and make sure that it did put those kexts that we just drag and dropped right here, those 4, did it put them in here? 1, 2, 3, 4. Yes, it did. So we'll click save. And now, guys, we are ready to boot this computer. But what we have to do is we have to put this folder into the hidden EFI partition on our USB stick. So let me get rid of this so we don't get confused. And to get to our hidden folder, we come up here, we click right there. This is my SanDisk right here. So I'm going to mount it. Put in your password. And right here, an EFI partition opened up. So this is our hidden partition. All right, so I already have this here, but I'm just for sake of showing you, I just rename that one because you cannot have any folders named EFI except the one you're booting from. So I'll just drag and drop it into here. And this is the folder that macOS is going to look for, EFI, not these. So now typically, of course, you would not have these other folders, so please don't get confused. All you're going to have is this EFI folder in your hidden partition. All right, so we are done. We're ready to boot this computer and see if we have any issues. But we must check our BIOS settings in any PC that we're going to install macOS. If you skip changing your BIOS settings, then this will never work. So let's close out of here and let's boot this thing up and get into the BIOS settings. Okay? All right, be right back. All right, guys, we are in the BIOS, and if this screen flickers, please forgive me. I've got a bad device here that I'm using when I'm in DOS. So, yeah, I'm real sorry about that. But let's get into this real quick. We'll go over here to Devices. Serial port, we want it disabled. USB setup, just like we have it here. We need this screen set up just like this. Video setup is very important, just like you see it here. Audio setup, just make sure it's turned on. Network setup, just enabled, no big deal. Advanced CPU setup, just like you see it here, we want that VTD disabled. So just like it is right here. These screens we don't need to worry about too much. And just like we see it here. Go over here to power and just have it set up like this is fine. Security. Everything here is pretty much fine as you see it. Okay, we'll go over to startup and we want everything like you see it right here. This works well. And then go down here. CSM support needs to be enabled on this for it to work. And then you want to change the first boot priority. Make sure it's UEFI. Everything you see just like here. All right, so that's it for the BIOS. Let's go ahead and get out of here and see if we can boot this computer. Okay, we'll come up here to a menu. Now, I already have macOS installed on this computer, but so you won't have this many icons, but you will definitely have this install macOS Sonoma. But before you do that, I want you to go over here to reset NVRAM and hit enter. Then let it come back. And then go over here to Sonoma and start installing. All right. So this process of installing is, it will install by itself. You won't need to do anything. It will go through many screens and many different boot ups. And when it is complete, we'll come back. All right, guys. So we do come up here to our disk utility install area. We want to go to disk utility, click continue, and then again, making sure that we select show all devices. As you can see right now, I cannot see the name of my drive that I want to install macOS on. So I show all devices, and here it is. That's my Kingston that I want to select to install to. So we click erase. I'm not going to erase mine because it's already installed. You can name the drive whatever you want, and make sure you're on APFS and GUID partition map and click erase. All right. Once that's done, you'll click up here and then install macOS Sonoma. Continue. Continue. Agree. And then select the drive we just named and click continue. And this will, like I said, go through a lot of different boot menus, and it will reboot itself, but it will come back and you'll be ready to finish the install process. Okay? All right, guys. So we'll come back when this is all done. Okay, guys, here we are ready to finish the install. So go down here and just finish up. Just get through all these screens. Not now. Nah, we'll skip this login. We'll give it a name and a password. And as you can tell, we've got a white background because our graphics are not set up yet, right? So we got to finish that after we get in here. And you're going to notice that the computer is very, very slow because when you don't have your graphics accelerated, it just slows everything way down. Okay, so there we are.